Welcome, everyone. I'm grateful to be with you today through American Jewish University's Wisden Center for Open Learning, as together we explore a question that is simultaneously ancient and urgently current. How does the Exodus story guide how we respond to today's moral and spiritual challenges? And by way of introduction, I'm Rabbi Jeff Salkin. I am a contributing editor to Religion News Service, where I write an award-winning column, Martini Judaism, for those who want to be shaken and stirred. It's also a podcast. It comes out about twice a week. And also, I'm the author of about 11 books, a 12th book coming out this summer. There's the link to purchasing the book that we'll be discussing today in the chat. I'm also the co-founder and co-director of a very exciting project called Wisdom Without Walls, an online salon for Jewish ideas. Twice a month, we gather Jews together on Zoom, and we expose you to the finest Jewish thought leaders in the world. And we talk about the implications of American Judaism and world Judaism after October 7th, which will be the lion's share of what we do today. My essays have also appeared in the Washington Post and commentary, the Wall Street Journal, Tablet, Forward. And the most important trivial thing about me is that I recently reversed the flow of Jewish history by being the first adult Jewish man to actually leave South Florida and to move to New Jersey, ostensibly to be near my kids. Our topic today, Tikkun Ha'am, Passover, crisis, and reclaiming Jewish identity, which is based on the book Tikkun Ha'am, Repairing Our People, Israel and the Crisis of Liberal Judaism. Let me start by telling you a story about a crazy ride from Ben Gurion Airport to Jerusalem several summers ago. I brought my suitcase and my backpack and my briefcase out to the curb at Ben Gurion Airport, and I got into one of those jitneys, a shirut, as it were, and I asked the driver, "Is there space for my stuff?" And he said, "Of course, put it next to me." Now, I have to tell you that the driver's name was Aviona. He was an Iraqi Jewish man in his late 70s. When we got to Jerusalem, he asked me the fateful question, again in Hebrew, because he doesn't speak English. Eifo hamizvada shelcha, where is your suitcase? And I realized that it was still on the curb at Ben Gurion Airport, which means that there was a very good chance that it had been reduced to ashes, that it was literally toast. At that moment, I proceeded to have a meltdown. For those of you who would like to have a very quick emotional ulpan, you just have to repeat after me these words in the privacy of your own home. Lo, 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 no, 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 no. I couldn't believe this had happened. Well, he called me a few names, some of which I actually deserved. And then he made a phone call, taking my phone number. A few seconds later, on his speakerphone, I could hear the glorious words, Ken matzati oto. Yes, I found it. I was in tears. And I said, "We have to go back to Ben Gurion Airport, don't we?" And he said, "Lo, lo." He pulled into a gas station, got out, got me my suitcase. And I was at this moment really in the third level of ecstasy. I reached into my wallet and he said to me, "Mazet, tip." "What is this, a tip? You're giving me a tip?" "Ain't tip. There's no tip for this." And then he proceeded to repeat from memory the two Torah mitzvot, the two commandments in the Torah, one from the book of Exodus, the other from Deuteronomy, that have to do with the necessity, the mitzvah, and the sacred obligation of returning lost objects to their rightful owners. And then he said to me these words that grabbed my soul. Anachnu achraim, he said. We are responsible. And so I want to start this conversation today by talking about the layers of Jewish responsibility. I could say that the layers are as thick and as elegant as the layers of matzah, but there are more layers of responsibility than there are layers of matzah on the Seder plate. Judaism understands it this way, that we have a primary responsibility to ourselves, and then to our families, to our communities, to our tribes, to our people, as it were, and then ultimately out to the world. We cannot skip over one of these levels of responsibility and leapfrog, fast track to the next one. Or think of it this way. If you drop a pebble into a pond, there will be ripples. And that is essentially how Judaism sees the world. We are the pebble dropped into the pond, and there are ripples of responsibility that flow out from ourselves to our families, to our communities, to our tribes, ultimately to the world. Our responsibilities might wind up being global, but they start with ourselves, with our tribe, and with our people. And by the way, in my book, Tikkun Ha'am, I have an entire chapter on why it is okay and even beneficial for the Jews to think of themselves as a tribe, that we can be tribal without being tribalistic. On Pesach, I tend to see myself at the table with my children, my grandchildren, with friends and family, as being part of links of a chain that go all the way back to Sinai and beyond, to Abraham and Sarah themselves. Now, I'm going to be very clear with you that what I did that day with Aviona constituted not only a sin, but also a social faux pas. Because I like to think of things using alliteration. At that moment, my sin was that I saw myself as being a customer, but he saw me as someone with whom he lived in covenant. We need more of this in American Judaism. Even and especially if you are non-Orthodox, we need to develop a greater sense of responsibility for each other, for the Jewish past, present, and future, and the Jewish people wherever they may be. So there's a story that I love to tell. It's about a cat that is chasing a mouse, and the mouse goes into the hole in the wall and looks out at the cat, and then ducks away again. And as the mouse is out of eyesight, the mouse says, meow, and the cat walks away. The other mice say to the mouse, what was that all about? And he said, now you understand why it is helpful to know a second language. I want to say that what Passover reminds us of is that we live in a universe of two languages. We live in a language of Americanism, which is the fluency that we all have for the American way of life, secularism and individualism, and that Judaism must be our second language. What has happened is there has been a shift in the American Jewish conversation, and I want to see this in sociological terms. Or, just as I temporarily lost my suitcase, American Jews have, let us hope, only temporarily lost a unique Jewish language. First, there has been a unique transformation in American communal structures. A number of years ago, Robert Putnam, who teaches at the Kennedy School of Government, wrote a very important book about the bowling industry. Now, here's what you probably don't know, even for those of you who go bowling. Apparently, there are more people bowling in America than ever before, but the bowling industry and bowling alleys have been losing, well, market share. And why is that? Here's what you might not know. The profit margin in the bowling industry, in bowling alleys, is not in renting the bowling balls, and it's not even in the rental of those comfortable shoes that everyone in town has already worn. No, in fact, the real profit margin, the business plan, is in the sale of food and beer. Now, the issue is this. As Robert Putnam notes, more people in America are bowling than ever before, but they are famously, hence the name of the book, often cited and not often read, they're bowling alone. Bowling leagues have disappeared. And bowling leagues is where the money is, because it's only in bowling leagues that people consume beer and food. And so there's been a loss of a kind of thick communal structure. We are no longer people who join. We don't join synagogues. We don't join churches. Even the evangelicals are experiencing this. There's been a loss of membership in civic organizations, the Elks, the Moose, PTAs, etc. In that sense, American Jews have assimilated into this pervasive American culture of bowling alone, which has itself led to a plague of loneliness. The second thing is radical individualism, in which we see ourselves in a kind of atomized way as radical individuals. Now, we say that we believe in this thing called community, and many of us long for community. But in my estimation, I think that many people say they want community, but in fact, what they mean when they say community is people that I like and who like me, my friends, as opposed to people who share an overarching vision, a communitarian vision, as the late Columbia University sociologist Amitai Etzioni would have put it. And then finally, consumerism, which is essentially an ethos that says I can buy whatever I want and whatever I need whenever I want it. And what I can't buy, I can rent. And that means that I measure something, institutions, wisdom, people, friendships, jobs, opportunities, by how good those things make me feel at any particular moment. It's the eternal urge to replace and to upgrade. And it becomes what the Protestant theologian Harvey Cox referred to years ago as the market as God. So here's the problem. Liberal Judaism in America has become a consumer commodity. And along with consumerism comes this specter of unlimited choice and customizability. So let me give you an example here. Starbucks claims that any individual customer, upon walking into a store, upon approaching a barista, has 80,000 ways to order a beverage. We're drowning, well, not in the latte perhaps, but we're drowning in choice. So what are the sociological outputs of this change in American life? Number one, American Jews report diminished ties to Judaism. The Pew Report says that Jews of no religion, Jews who say they have no religion, account for 31% of the American Jewish population. And this has very, very significant and troubling implications for synagogue affiliation and the number of people who are choosing to enter Jewish professional life and the infrastructure of national Jewish organizations. Second, religion has a decreased role in everyday life. Now, I will share with you a statistic, you can look it up on your own, which is that American Jews attend religious services more than any other religious group in America, with the possible exception of the Unitarians. Now, what gets very scary and even in some ways distressing for me, and I hope for us, is that American non-Orthodox Jews feel less responsibility for helping Jews around the world. Let me give you a statistic. 80% of Orthodox Jews claim that they have a responsibility to help Jews around the world. When you go to conservative Jews, that drops to 42%. And for Reform Jews, it's 23%. And then we have the situation of American non-Orthodox Jews reporting shrinking emotional and political ties with Israel, all of which have become, I think, exacerbated by what has happened after October 7th. So what does this mean, by the way, for our young people? For younger people, it means that fewer say that being Jewish is important to them. Fewer feel a connection to the broader Jewish people. Fewer report having close Jewish friends, and fewer observe Jewish traditions, however they are defined. Now, let me just do a little housekeeping here. You may have a question. Please feel free to ask it in the chat or the Q&A. We'll get to your questions. We want to leave time a little bit later. We want to make sure that we can have a conversation about this as if it were the Pesach table itself. So that was the situation that we came to, and that was the situation that we found ourselves in on October 6th, 2023. Now, let me tell you what happened. The book is Tikkun Ha'am, Israel and the Crisis of Liberal Judaism. That was not its original name. I'm not really sure what its original name was. But my publishers at Wicked Sun Publishing decided that they wanted to name it Tikkun Ha'am as an ironic, playful, and mischievous rhyme of the phrase Tikkun Olam. Rather than repairing the world, it would be about repairing our people, which, as you've heard me say, is a necessity that gets us to that goal of repairing the world. I go to sleep on October 6th, 2023, on Friday night, as we all did. On October 7th, when we woke up, we were in a different era of American Judaism. We had gone out one era and in the next. It became utterly apparent to me that what I had written in this book on the Jewish present and future, on the potential of Jewish culture in America being a driving force and, as it were, a nutrient in the meal of American Judaism, was now inadequate. I called my publishers and I said to them, I have to rewrite the introduction. And they said to me, you have exactly 24 hours. By this time tomorrow, we need a new introduction from you. And that's what I did. Now, in the book, what you'll discover is that on the afternoon of October 7th and the evening of October 7th and on the morning of October 8th, I was starting to reflect on what was already about to happen in the Jewish world. I could sense what was going to happen. And what you have in the book, actually, is the first ever Polaroid, the selfie of the American Jewish community, as we experienced it on October 7th. Now, I have some very good news for you. Everything that I predicted has come to pass. I have some bad news for you, too. Everything I have predicted has come to pass. Let me share with you what I thought was going to happen and what, in fact, has happened. There is now a post-October 7th Judaism with certain challenges. First of all, we needed and we need to recalibrate the balance between universalism, caring for all people, and particularism, prioritizing the Jewish people. You all know that mantra, if I am not for myself, who will be for me? And if I'm only for myself, what am I? That's from Pirkei Avot. Now, what's happened is that in recent years, in many corners of the liberal Jewish world, there has been an emphasis on the second part of that text. And if I'm only for myself, what am I? A drifting towards the universal. And on October 7th, many American Jews said, no, if I'm not for myself, who will be for me? And that's because many of our partners in the progressive corners of American politics abandoned us. What we experienced on October 7th, October 8th, and going forward was apathy, tone deafness, outright hostility, and betrayal. On October 7th, we said to ourselves that we would have at most 24 to 48 hours of the world's sympathy, but we knew as soon as Israel fought back against Hamas, that sympathy would evaporate. And in fact, our progressive allies did not help. They called for a ceasefire, but not for a release of the hostages. They did not speak up in favor of the Red Cross being allowed to visit the hostages. And as for what happened on October 7th to Jewish women, well, the only thing that I can say is that I invented a word for this, and it's not a word I'm proud of inventing. It's gynocide. There was complete, utter tone deafness from the international human rights community, from international women's organizations, or to quote Paul Simon, to whom I dedicated a chapter of my book, The Sounds of Silence. Secondly, we came to understand that anti-Semitism is a real and present danger, and we were accustomed to seeing those dangers coming from the right. But we came to see that the anti-Semitism had come and was coming and is still coming from the left. Now, I like to teach in alliteration, so let me give it to you again. Most of the anti-Semitic violence in America has come from the right. The right has the weapons, W, and the left has the words. The challenge here is that there's a 100% probability that ugly words will lead to ugly actions and will lead to violence. When we hear, for example, the slogan, "From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free," there's only one way of truly interpreting that, and that is for not a two-state solution, but a no-state solution, the obliteration of the Jewish sovereign presence in the land of Israel. And as far as I know, there are only three ways that the Jews leave Israel: by plane, by boat, or by body bag, and none of us here have signed up for any of those possibilities. The third thing is something that I predicted would happen. I had no idea how right I was, and I didn't want to be as right as I am, which is this culture war that has exploded on American college campuses. And right now we are dealing, at this moment, in real time, we are dealing with the flashback that has happened as a result of this culture war. When crowds at Columbia University chant "Long live the Intifada," what they're essentially saying is that there should be nowhere in the world where Jews are safe. And this is a political conversation. It's also a legal conversation. I'm a little bit hesitant to get into it, but you're free to discuss this around your Pesach tables. I think it'll be on everyone's lips, which is, since we're speaking about freedom, what Pesach is not about is about freedom simply as carte blanche, but what does it mean to live in covenant with each other? What does it mean for us to create a civil society that is based on civil conversation? This is not about freedom of speech or even academic freedom. That's not what's at question here. What's at question here is, when does that become hate speech? And when does that hate speech enable violence, moral violence, and potentially even physical violence against Jews on college campuses? When on October 7th, a professor at Cornell University said that he felt exhilarated by what Hamas had done, we were clearly in a different territory. And I have to ask the question about Columbia University. Would you like to guess how many students there are at Columbia University? I'm just going to tell you right now. You don't have to guess. Don't Google it. 40,000. And how many were involved with the encampments and these ugly protests against not only Israeli policy, but against Jewish students, preventing professors from teaching, preventing students from learning, even to the point where commencement had to be canceled? At most, about 1,000 students, if in fact they were all students. That means that there were 39,000 people who did not say anything, who did not speak up, and did not say, "My education is being interrupted. What I've paid for, I have not been able to get." And finally, the crisis in Jewish education. The chickens came home to roost on not October 7th, on October 9th, on Monday, as Jewish college students texted their parents and said, "I'm being called a baby killer, a purveyor of apartheid and settler colonialism. How do I answer this?" And the fact of the matter is that they have no database with which to answer, because upwards of 60% of American Jewish kids are not getting any Jewish education beyond puberty. And the result of that is that they can't answer these questions at a time when intellectually they are able to frame the answers to these questions. They're simply not there. And by the way, I don't blame my colleagues. I don't blame rabbis or cantors or educators. I think most of us have done the best we possibly can with the, the kids and the time, the money and the resources that we have been able to receive. But we are in a system now in which parents have no choice because it's a system of sports and of after school tutors where kids are now forced to work on their resumes for college. We are stuck in a system that works against any kind of vigorous Jewish identification. Let's bring it home to Pesach. At the Passover table, we will be discussing the good things that are going on. First of all, while there are challenges to American Judaism after October 7th, there's also now potential, what the Federation system is calling the surge. We are told that, number one, more parents are reevaluating their educational and leisure choices, like summer camps and immersion programs for their children. You see that more than a third of unaffiliated Jews say they'd be open to joining a synagogue now. We don't know if that's true. We don't know. We are told that Jews want to engage more in Jewish life. I'm certainly seeing it through Wisdom Without Walls, through our program. The Wisdom program at AJU, Torah study on Shabbat morning at various levels in congregational life. All these things are, I think, witness to that. And there has been an anecdotal, but every colleague of mine tells me this, uptick in the number of conversions to Judaism. But getting back to that Pesach table, I want to speak to you about the imperative for us at this particular moment. And I'm going to go to the image of the four children, or the four sons, as they're sometimes called. You know who they are. They are the wise child. There is the wicked child, the Rasha, which I prefer to call the rebellious child, the simple child, and the one she'eino yodea lishol, one who doesn't even know how to ask the question. And my fear is that without a vigorous interpretation of Jewish education and re-excitement of Jewish education in our country on the part of non-Orthodox Jews as part of our communal structure, we will create a generation who does not know how to ask the question. But I want to go back to my favorite kid. It's not only because this book, Tikkun Ha'am, Israel and the Crisis of Liberal Judaism, was published by a publishing company called Wicked Son. I've always believed that I am the wicked son. I am someone who has a supply of snark in my back pocket. Not evil snark, but I've always respected the so-called wicked child as the one who stands out. So let's meet the wicked child or the rebellious child. Let's start with how the Haggadah frames it. The wicked son, let's just take son there, as the traditional text puts it. What does he say? What is this service to you? To you, he says, not to him. When he sets himself apart from the community, he denies the very core of our beliefs. And this is really important to know. This is not a theological rebel who says, I don't believe in God. The real operative word here is you. You. What does it mean to you? And you must set his teeth on edge and tell him, because of this, the Lord acted for me when I came out of Egypt, for me and not for him. Had he been there, he would not have been redeemed. Now, I've always believed this to be a very harsh answer to that particular child. But I want to take you on a journey, not through text. I want to take you on a Pesach journey through the art of the Haggadah. Because in this particular instance, and in other particular instances as well, I will say to you, we learn more about the implications of this so-called rebellious child, not from the words, but from the art. Even and especially at times when Jews did not feel that they had the permission to toy with the text of the Haggadah, they always had the ability to play with the art of the Haggadah. They always had the ability to play with the Haggadah itself. That's why there are so many editions of the Haggadah. It was never frozen in time. So let me show you the first trope, as it were. This is from medieval Haggadah. And you will see that the wise child over here, this turbaned, okay, and the wicked one, the Rasha, is a warrior and a soldier. Now, here's something very interesting. A good topic for conversation at the Pesach table, at the Seder, is to ask ourselves, well, what do we do when the wicked child is not the wicked child? In other words, our ancestors were powerless, essentially until May 1948, with many glimmers of exceptions here. What do you do when you integrate powerlessness into your being and you express it through art and through text, but you're not powerless anymore? This led to generations of Jews who either didn't want to fight, didn't like to fight, or were told by their parents, don't fight, be a good boy. That's a very common theme in medieval Haggadot. Now, this is the Arthur Szyk Haggadah, Szych, very famous Haggadah. I want to show you how these guys, these are all guys, by the way, and they're often guys in the Haggadot, are portrayed. You have the Chacham, who looks like your typical Haredi Jew, as it were. And then you have the Rasha, again, the wicked son. Now, what's important here is that the wicked son here is an assimilationist. He is dressed for going out for a ride or to play polo, as it were, like a member of the British upper class. And here I recall the legacy of Ralph Lauren, née Lifshitz, who ironically designed a world through polo, Ralph Lauren, that Jews could only have dreamed of entering, the clubs they could not join, the Tony suburbs in which they could not live, and in particular, the universities that they could not attend, in particular Harvard, Yale, Princeton, all of which, up until about 100 years ago, had very strict quotas against Jewish students. And it's ironic to me that of several of the universities that are now facing Title VI complaints about anti-Semitism, there are places where Jews could not have entered 100 years ago. I love this one. In one modern Haggadah, the artist imagines the four children as the Marx Brothers, with Groucho appearing as the wicked child. I have to laugh here because of the Marx Brothers, you have one who always presented himself as Italian, who spoke in a fake Italian accent. You have another one who didn't speak at all. Okay, Groucho was the only one who physically presented himself with a Jewish stereotype. In fact, I think in Animal Crackers, there's the song Captain Spaulding the Explorer, and he chimes in, "Did someone call me Schnorrer?" Here, the wicked son is the one who gets in your face and who is the mocker and the scoffer. This is one from Chicago in the late 1880s. This is the wicked son, as you'll forgive me, as a wise ass. Off screen here, well, you can see the simple child here. Here you've got the wise child who looks exactly like Maimonides. And you've got the wicked son who's smoking a cigar, tilting his chair back from the table as a way of distancing himself. And you're asking yourselves, well, aren't there any girls who are rebellious children? Yes. This is from the Hartman Haggadah, A Different Night. And here you see the rebellious daughter, the wise daughter studying the Talmud, as it were, and the rebellious daughter protesting against animal tests. Well, what do we do about this wicked child? Who is the wicked child in America today? Let me give you what Jeffrey Goldberg said about this. In the New American Haggadah, yes, the Jeffrey Goldberg, who was invited to that virtual Seder along with other people from the defense establishment. Jeffrey Goldberg, I wrote a column about him recently. He's my hero. I want him to come to my Seder. What the wicked child is saying, in effect, is the fate of my people is not my concern. Here is a vexing demand sometimes made of young Jews by their elders in America today. You should worry about Jews more than you worry about non-Jews. In the shtetls of the Pale or the ghettos of Morocco, this was not such a difficult thing to ask, because Jews were sequestered from the world. But in America, a place that accepts, even embraces its Jewish citizens, this becomes a more troubling proposition. A war rages in the souls of American Jews, the war between the universal and the particular. There are so many challenges embedded in Judaism, but perhaps this is the greatest one of all. How do we balance our faith's demand to care especially for our fellow Jews and care especially for the world at the same time? Now, how am I shaping it this particular year for Pesach? I am well aware of how many Pesach tables, how many Sedorim there will be, where we are welcoming those young people and members of our family who might have, in other contexts, been deemed wicked. I would have to say this. For those people who deny that there should be an Israel, for those people who wish there was no Israel, for those people who actively cheer on those who would do harm to the state of Israel and to Jews, it grieves me to say this, but I feel my heart constricting here. But there are actually a great number of our young people, and I say this now as a way of offering comfort and I hope strength and inspiration to everyone, who are not saying that. There are people out there, and we are up against people who want no Israel. But we are also encountering many people, many of them are young people, who don't want no Israel, but they want a better Israel. They deserve to bring to the table their struggles over the meaning of Jewish peoplehood, of Jewish nationhood, of the meaning of statecraft, the actions and the policies of the Israeli government. We should be asking ourselves, to what extent has Israel been successful in living up to its own ideals as stated in its Megillat Atzmaut, its scroll, its declaration of independence? We cannot send them away from the table. Because if we do, we're going to wind up with the fourth child, the one who doesn't care enough to ask. We cannot afford the generation that is mute, lacking curiosity, and checked out. And so when it comes to including those people, I'm going to have to, in some ways, restate that classic line from the movie Jaws. You know, where they say you're going to need a bigger boat? Where are people in pain? And that pain deserves a bigger table. Where are we? Yossi Klein Halevi puts it this way. There are two holidays, this is my addition to what Yossi has taught, adjacent to each other, separated by 30 days that start with the letter Peh, the letter P. Peh meaning mouth. They're two stories we tell ourselves. There are the Purim Jews, for whom the major mitzvah is to remember Amalek, which means don't be weak. And there are the Pesach Jews, for whom the major mitzvah is remember that you were slaves in Egypt. And that means not to be cruel. As we wind towards the exciting conclusion, I would share with you this piece of art by an artist named Dennis Carden. It's called Lover's Quarrel. I think this epitomizes where American Jews are today. We have these two guys who are the same guy. The guy on the left wears a kippah. The guy on the right wears a baseball cap. The serious Jew, the secular Jew. And they are stitched together. There's a scar where they're stitched together. And they don't want to be severed. They're trying to figure out how to integrate their identity. They don't want to be broken like that middle matzah. They want to be whole. Now, I know what you're asking yourselves. Some of you are asking yourselves, hey, whatever happened to the Iraqi Jewish Israeli cab driver, the van driver, the Sherut driver, Avi Yonah? I'm glad you asked. I still had his phone number, and so on Rosh Hashanah, I called him, and I asked him if he remembered me. And he said, absolutely, he remembered me, and he even remembered the address to which he was taking me. I said to him these words, Avi Yonah, I have sat at the feet of the greatest Jewish teachers of our time in lecture halls and classrooms, but no one taught me as much Torah in as little time and in as small a space as you did that day on the road to Jerusalem. And we were both in tears, and he said, can I give you a blessing? He gave me a blessing, and he said, can I give you a blessing for your kehillah, for your community? And he did as well. And so my blessing is simply this. I hope it's a sweet Pesach. It's a difficult Pesach for the Jewish people, and it's not the first Pesach of challenge, in which we wonder, what will the story that this Jewish mouth is saying? But moreover, when we are searching for the afikomen, the remnant piece that has been broken from us, if you have lost something, I hope that you find it. The book is called Tikkun Ha'am for a very important reason. There are three kinds of tikkun, three kinds of repair that Judaism is based on. There is Tikkun Ha'am, repairing our people. There is Tikkun Olam, repairing the world. And there's a third one, Tikkun Atzmi, to repair ourselves. All three of those are necessary for the Jewish task today. I do want to leave time for questions in the chat or out loud, however we choose to navigate these, but I'm all yours.
Okay, we have,
and thank you.
great. We have a question from Brittany. They said this might be somewhat off topic, but how do we know when it's time to make Aliyah to Israel? It seems that some do not believe it will get much worse than it is now. Many say that it'll calm down. Historically speaking, though, didn't the Jewish people often say that right up to a catastrophe? Do you think that we'll need to flee to Israel anytime soon? Thank you for your time. I can't wait to read the book.
Well, thank you, Brittany. How do we know when it's time to make Aliyah to Israel? Listen, I have a very interesting idea about Aliyah because every year I toy with it, usually right around December. There are two reasons to make Aliyah. The first one is because you want to, and the other one is because you need to. As for want to be able to live a full Jewish life in the land of Israel, speaking Hebrew, there's never a bad time not to. But the question that you're asking is, when will it become a necessity? I have an article, I think, coming out today or tomorrow about the sin of complacency, and that American Jews cannot be complacent. You're asking the same question that German Jews probably failed to ask themselves en masse in Germany in the 1930s. I want to now counsel against a kind of overheated fatalism and saying that it's all over. I don't think it's over at all. In fact, I would say that it's time for American Jews to lean in, for American Jews to name their values, and I think we have a very, very long time to go before we are seriously endangered in this country. Let me not make a political statement. As bad as it is in this country right now, we are still a nation of laws, and I think we have to behave that way.
Another follow-up question. What do you foresee in the next decade or two for American Jewry?
Oh my gosh, if I could answer that accurately, I would be winning some kind of Nobel Prize, not a peace prize, but a prophecy prize. Um, if I could look at my crystal ball or see a pattern in the Haroset, uh, I can see a lot of American Jews becoming much more serious about their Judaism. And at the same time, I can see many American Jews who are younger questioning increasingly not the existence of the state of Israel, but in some cases questioning those policies. Uh, I see, therefore, a sector of the community that's going to be moving more traditionally, not Orthodox, but more Jewishly affirmative, and another section of the community that's going to be going more affirmatively towards what Yisrael means, which is to wrestle with God and with meaning itself.
Wonderful. If you have any more questions, you can please put them in the question and answer box at the bottom of the screen. Here's one. Isn't there a lack of common understanding of whether and when anti-Zionism or even a mere criticism of the Israeli government amounts to anti-Semitism? If many of us believe that our claim to anti-Semitism is inflated or inaccurate, don't we need some serious fact-checking and self-examination around those concepts?
That's a good question. It's a good challenging question. I thank you for asking that. Um, when does it become anti-Semitism? I think when it becomes a matter of double standards, holding Israel to standards that we would not hold other countries to in similar situations. When it comes about demonization of the Jew, the use of anti-Semitic imagery in order to have this conversation about Israeli policy. And I also think it's about the denial of the right of the Jewish state to exist and to exist in a way that other states would exist as well. I think those are pretty much based loosely on Sharansky's 3Ds. I also think, by the way, and it's controversial, you have the IHRA, the international definition of anti-Semitism, which includes holding Israel out to unrealistic ideas and prospects and demands as being a form of anti-Semitism. When does it become anti-Semitism? And it's not even about fact-checking. First of all, I don't use that phrase a lot. Uh, I worked for the ADL at one point, and I was taught by the indefatigable Abe Foxman, don't call someone an anti-Semite. You can say that someone's using anti-Semitic ideas or language or involved in anti-Semitic acts. Don't call someone an anti-Semite. So I don't draw that pistol that quickly. I do think that the refusal to believe that the Jews are a nation and are entitled to self-determination in their ancestral homeland sometimes does become anti-Semitism, depending on the tone and the language. Finally, I know that there was a question was asked, how could I have gotten this far without mentioning the suffering in Gaza? The reason is that I couldn't speak about everything, and I was mostly about Tikkun Ha'am today rather than Tikkun Olam. Though I will say to you that there is a place for this. And I would encourage you to do this. As you know, when we recite the plagues on Egypt, there is a custom to drop a drop of wine for each plague to symbolize the lessening of our joy. I have been saying in print and around other fora that what has happened in Gaza is a tragedy. The loss of human life is a tragedy. Full stop. End of sentence. The Jewish heart is not constricted The Jewish heart is large enough to be able to admit that. And while we might want to, and I think necessarily so, put our own people's pain as front and center within our consciousness, nowhere does that mean that we are not allowed to engage in the pain of other people. I feel a responsibility to make that clear. On the other hand, at this particular stage of my life and a particular stage of where things are in the Jewish world, I now prioritize the pain that our people and the ongoing trauma that our people has suffered, including the hostages who once again are going to be, as it were, enveloped in the plague of darkness, who are in the tunnels and who are not getting out. This takes for me priority of purpose. And it's only because, as I've said, I have to start with my own family first, and then I get out to the world. I'm well aware that this will not satisfy everyone, but it's as good as I get today. More questions or
One
comments?
one more question. How do you think we should guide our college-aged kids who experience anti-Semitism who may have not before now?
I didn't hear that. Can you say that one more time, please?
Sorry, how do you think we should guide our college-age kids who experience anti-Semitism, and who may have not experienced it before now?
Oh, God. Well, I think we have to do a couple of things. Number one, this is where the answer to the simple child comes in. At patachlo, you have to open up the conversation. I think our kids need Jewish brain and Jewish spine. And I think we have to be able to strengthen our kids and encourage them and inspire them to not walk away from this. I will tell you that in my own alma mater, I am part of a group of alumni who's very concerned about the growth of anti-Semitism on campus. And when I hear about Jewish college students who are not going to Hillel because they're afraid of being photographed at Hillel, coming out of Hillel, because they're afraid that those photographs might someday affect their future careers in the arts, I say to myself, Jewish students are being kicked back into the 1930s in this country. I take it personally. And it's okay for us to tell our kids to take it personally. And I think it's also very important for us our kids to know something. I was talking to someone about his daughter who was on a date with someone, and she's on this date with this guy, and the guy asks her in the middle of the day, "Are you a Zionist?" Well, that's just a code word for saying Jew. Our kids should recognize Jew hatred when it comes up, and they should stand up. And they should stand up, and they have to be counted. More questions, comments? Aaron Bisno, Rabbi Aaron Bisno.
I have another one, yeah, from Aaron Bisnote. It seems that the divide between Orthodox/Torah true Judaism and the liberal Jewish branches of our community are further apart than ever. We may even be able to, in late stage liberal Judaism, we may even be in late stage liberal Judaism wherein we have lost any sense of obligation or community. It seems liberal Jews and their rabbis have no sense of shame. Some of them are claiming the moniker anti-Zionist even. Given this trajectory, what do you see as the future of Reform Judaism?
Well, Aaron and I talk about this about once a week. Aaron's one of my closest friends. I think that the only future I see for Reform Judaism and liberal Judaism in general is the growth of community, is the growth of obligation. And I think that is exactly what Reform rabbis and educators, conservative rabbis and educators need to teach. And I think that we have to put that forward in a way that is consonant with our own ideology. I believe that, to quote the late Israeli intellectual Amos Oz, we have inherited a household of future furniture from the Jewish past. We have to figure out what goes into the living room and what goes into the attic. And I think we have to make those decisions. As to Wesley Brown, being Jewish is not synonymous with being Zionist. My thoughts. It is not synonymous with being Zionist. And while there are Jews who are not Zionists, I define Zionism as the Jewish right of self-determination in its ancestral homeland. And while it is true that not all Jews are Zionists and not all Zionists are Jews, I believe that a connection to the land and Jewish sovereignty is an essential part of Jewish identity today. I could be wrong. That's me.
Well, that's the end of our questions.
Yep, I want to just once again say to everyone, thank you for being here. I want to thank the AJU for being here. I want to thank you for being part of this important conversation. With Pesach beginning this Saturday, I really hope that this exploration of the Exodus story gives you some timely meaning and inspiration as you prepare to gather around your Seder table. If it resonates with you, please read my book, purchase my book, follow my column on religionnews.com, but also please support the Wisdom Center for Open Learning in continuing to offer free, accessible Jewish learning to our community. And please make a donation if you're giving tzedakah around Pesach. Both of those links can be found in the chat, and your generosity helps ensure that powerful, relevant conversations like this remain open to all. I thank you, and I thank you, Chag Sameach. The book is called, Evan, once again, hold on, it's called Tikkun Ha'am, Repairing Our People, Israel and the Crisis of Liberal Judaism, and my column is Martini Judaism. And happy to further engage people if you can find me anywhere out in the world. And I thank you for being here. Check out wisdomwithoutwalls.org. We bring you the finest Jewish thought leaders in the world twice a month to your computer screen. And we're eager to grow that community, which has already become very, very powerful. I thank you. Chag Sameach, everyone. May you all find the Afikomen, whatever that is.